Now, without further ado, let's introduce our first speakers of today with our keynote presentation for the day with Sara Baskentli, Western University, Western Washington University, Lauren Block of City University of New York, and Mimi Morrin of Rutgers University of Camden, telling us about how food and beverage serving temperatures can affect consumer perception and behavior. Now, Dr. Morrin is the Henry Rutgers Professor of Marketing at Rutgers University School of Business in Camden, New Jersey. Her research focuses on examining how the human senses impact consumer decision-making. Dr. Lauren Block is the Lippert Professor of Marketing at the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College. Her primary focus is really on the areas of consumer well-being and consumer judgments on the efficacy of health-related products and magical thinking and extraordinary belief, specifically around sensory marketing. Dr. Sara Baskentli, is an assistant professor at Western Washington University and received her PhD from the SUNY as well, where she was a Sheth Consortium Fellow. She conducts research in the area of consumer well-being as well, with specific interest in morality, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and sensory marketing. So without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Dr. Morrin, who's going to give a little bit more information about this project and her collaborations. Thank you so much, Mimi. I'm going to stop sharing so that Sara can share her screen.
Great. All right. Thank you, Michelle. Again, I'm Mimi Morrin, Professor of Marketing at Rutgers in Camden, New Jersey, where I conduct sensory marketing research. And I'm very happy today that we'll be sharing with you several results from a project recently published in the journal Appetite. I was kindly invited to join this project by Dr. Lauren Block, who's also a professor of marketing, but she's at the City University of New York. We've known each other since graduate school days. I don't want to mention how long ago that was, but it was in a previous century. And she told me about some fascinating work being done by one of her doctoral students, Sara Baskentli, on the effect of food and beverage temperatures on consumer behavior. So Sara is going to present some of our key findings. I hope you find them interesting. So at this point, I will hand over the presentation to Sara.
All right, okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Mimi. And thank you everybody for allowing me the opportunity to present our research here. I feel so lucky to be working with these two incredible researchers, Mimi and Lauren. And it feels like ages ago, but also like yesterday. But I'm excited to share what we did with all of you. A little bit about me, I'm a consumer well-being researcher and my focus is on transformative consumer research. In this research, I'm going to talk about food well-being and food relationships. Specifically, I'm going to talk about serving temperature and how it affects our behaviors. Let's get started. If I can. All right, okay. So today I will talk to you about a project. This project started in 2014. And this paper and the findings received a lot of attention in the media after its publication. I think the titles of these news outlets did a great job in explaining what we found and at least one of our findings, such as why cold sandwiches make you reach for chips. But I will explain, of course, what we found in more detail. So I divided the presentation into three sections. The first section, I will talk about an interesting and robust belief that consumers have. And then I will talk about how this belief and overall beliefs around serving temperature can impact your decisions. And then finally, I will explain why this is happening. So around the time I became interested in the food domain, many newspapers were covering new FDA rules about calorie posting, and which will supposedly were there to help consumers make better food decisions. I wanted to work on the food domain, specifically in calorie estimations, or more so in calorie misestimations, which impact consumers' decision-making and eventually well-being. This research focuses on really common decision that consumers make, most probably several times a day, the decision at what temperature they wish to consume their foods. These are two photographs that we took from an airport grab and go and a sit down restaurant, just to illustrate to you how common this decision is. I'm not sure if you can see, but here it says served hot or cold. So you can choose any of the sandwiches here and ask for the server to have it hot or cold. Same mentality here. So in both scenarios, you can choose the food item like a sandwich and then get it warmed up if you wish to do so. We suggest that this seemingly insignificant decision that maybe we give every day, whether to eat a food or hot or cold, can lead to caloric misestimation and might impact subsequent purchases. We believe that those who eat cold might think that it is less caloric. This is not scientifically true. The same item, whether hot or cold, has the same number of calories. So if you drink your black coffee today, either hot or cold, it has the same number of calories. But it seems like people infer or intuit otherwise. And let's talk about what calories have to do with serving temperature. So we're all aware that there is inaccurate information online. So the anecdotal evidence from a variety of online forums suggests that many consumers believe that there is a relationship between serving temperature and caloric content. So if you look at this one on the right, if a calorie is a measurement of energy, does hot food have more calories than a cold version of the same dish? Or this one in the middle, eating hot food equals more calories? So as you can see, this one on the right is from Reddit, and it received 39 comments. Most of these comments are posted to correct this belief. And if you go into details and read all the comments like I did, you're going to see majority of the people struggle with this belief, right? In addition to that, we've seen that in this particular post, there was 81 upvoting. What does that mean? It means that people think that this is a useful question for the Reddit community. After this question is posted in the physics forum, many experts, postdocs or doctors started correcting this belief as well. So if people have this belief that cold food has less calories, hot food has more calories, even though the food item is same, does our consumption behavior changes with this belief? Can this be one of the subtle cues that can impact a business's bottom line and also consumer well-being? All right, so we refer to this as the serving temperature effect, which is the notion that a food or beverage served cold is perceived to have fewer calories and perceived to be less fattening than the same item served hot. Here, I would like to emphasize something before moving on. I'm talking about the same food with same ingredients, same size, same form, and same cooking procedure. So if we're investigating this sandwich here, simply served hot or cold. So as a side note, we're looking into the foods that can be served hot or cold. All right. So again, this is not scientifically true. The same item, whether hot or cold, has the same number of calories. But it seems like people infer otherwise. To investigate this, we turn to the literature on biases in caloric estimation. We situate this work within the large literature on consumer biases in food choice and consumption, but more specifically, our work adds to the growing literature on food biases around calorie and health perceptions. So there are multiple examples of that, but CSR positioning is an interesting one. So where a company that positions itself as a social responsible company creates a health halo and their food is perceived to have less calories. Another really famous example is the averaging bias, which suggests that when evaluating combinations of healthy and indulgent options, consumers tend to systematically underestimate the combined calorie content such that they end up averaging rather than adding the calories contained in the Weiss and merging. So literature is full of examples when it comes to biased caloric estimation. So we situate our work in here too. Biased caloric estimates have really important implications for consumer well-being. Underconsumption of calories can lead to underestimation of calories, can lead to obesity and overconsumption. And it also impacts subsequent choices. For instance, it has been shown that we tend to pair unhealthy items with healthy ones. So if a consumer consumes a healthy dish, a healthy entree, they are more likely to choose an unhealthy side. So we expect to find a similar behavior in our results as well. Since consumers think that cold items have less calories, they'll be more likely to be lenient when it comes to cold foods. Right? So formally stated, foods and beverages served cold will be perceived to have a lower caloric content than the same item served hot. Next, I will go over the empirical support for our framework. Oops, these AirPods. All right. All right, so we had one objective in this study, and that was to establish the existence of the effect in a highly controlled lab environment. We ran this study at Baruch College with 181 students, and this is an actual consumption study. Majority of the studies that I will show you here are actual consumption studies. Our research assistant provided one chocolate chip cookie to the participants, to each participant. Then people were instructed to consume the cookie in one of the three conditions: cold, hot, or room temperature. We didn't really have any expectations regarding the calorie estimates of the room temperature food, other than it should be in between hot and cold serving temperatures. We asked them several questions. First one, how would you rate the temperature of the cookie you consumed from 1 very cold to 7 very hot? This is a manipulation check question. It was asked to determine the effectiveness of the manipulation in our design. We also asked them 2 questions about our main DB, which is going to be consistent in the first part of the presentation. And that was, how would you describe the caloric content of the cookie you tasted? 1 very low in calories and 7 very high in calories. And how fattening was the cookie you tried? 1 not at all, 7 very much so. And then we combined these 2 measures to create an index of perceived caloric content as suggested in previous research. All right, as shown in the graphs, the manipulation worked as intended. What does that mean? Where those who consumed cold cookie perceived it to be colder than the warm and the room temperature one. Next, we looked at the existence of the serving temperature effect. As hypothesized, we found that those who consumed the cold cookie perceived the cookie to be less caloric than the same item consumed hot. There were no significant differences between the cold and the room temperature condition or hot and the room temperature condition. Next, we wanted to replicate the existence of the serving temperature effect by utilizing a beverage. This study is another consumption study, and this is a really important study for us, as with this study, we eliminated several sensory measures as alternative explanations. What are those? Such as oral haptics, creaminess, thickness, texture, and so on and so forth. Here in this study, the research assistant placed 1 cup, 8 ounces of old-fashioned apple cider, the brand name removed, they didn't know the brand name. This in 2 conditions, either in cold, refrigerated for 24 hours, or hot, microwave on high for 50 seconds. Participants were asked not to touch the cup, but to use a plastic spoon to sample exactly 4 spoons of the apple cider. This way, we were able to control for the total amount consumed by each participant, and we ensured that participants were rating the beverage at the exact serving temperature that we wanted them to. We instructed participants not to hold the cup because we wanted to control for any effects that might arise from cup holding, especially holding a warm cup has been shown to impact several behaviors. As a cover story, we told respondents that we were interested in for you to evaluate a new plastic spoon. Again, we asked for the manipulation check. How would you rate the temperature of the cider you consumed? And then we used the same measures to measure the perceived caloric content. But in addition to that, we also asked perceived caloric content as a numeric estimate of the calories from 0 to 1,000. First of all, the manipulation worked. People who consumed the cold cider thought that it was colder than the warm. But more importantly, we replicated our effect, and we showed that people who consumed the cold apple cider thought that it had less calories than the same item consumed hot. Very similarly, as you can see here in the numeric calories, we see a correlation as well, right? So people who consumed the cold estimated the caloric content to be around 125, where people in the hot condition estimated the caloric content to be 175. Next, we looked into another item. In this study, we used a 2% reduced fat milk. So 105 undergraduate students at an East Coast university participated in this study. Everybody were given 1 cup, 4 ounces per participant, and were asked to consume the milk. We had the similar procedure with the apple cider. They used a spoon and they sampled 4 spoons, and then they started responding to the survey questions. This is again an actual consumption study. People did really consume the milk. Manipulation check worked as intended. People who drank the cold milk, they thought that it was colder than the warm one. But more importantly, again, the perceived caloric content, that bias also worked. People who consumed the cold milk thought that it had less calories than the same item served hot. All right, so there were 2 goals of this new study. We wanted to test our effect in a different population. So in this study, we recruited 101 MTurk participants, but so far we have been running our studies at the lab in a student population. And the second goal was to test the bidirectionality of the effect. According to our theorizing, consumers intuit that cold food has less calories than a hot version of the same dish. Here we examine if the reverse logic also holds. In other words, we see whether foods framed as higher caloric are expected to be served hot, whereas foods framed as lower caloric are expected to be served cold. So following past procedure, we manipulated calorie perceptions by giving respondents a scenario that led them to compare the healthiness of the stimulus sandwich with a reference sandwich, which is high or low in calories. So we wanted to reduce the variance resulting from people's lack of precise caloric content knowledge. So the only difference between conditions was the caloric content of the reference sandwich. It was either 419 calories fewer than the reference sandwich, which would be the low calorie framework, or it was 419 calories more than the reference sandwich, which would be the high calorie framing condition. So basically in this framing manipulation, we expected to impact participants' perceptions of whether that 819 calorie sandwich was a high or a low calorie food. First of all, again, our manipulation check worked. People who were in the high calorie framing condition thought that 819 calorie sandwich had more calories than the low calorie framing condition. Then we asked participants to estimate the serving temperature on a 7-point scale. What's the best serving temperature for the sandwich? 1 very cold, 7 very hot. We found that those in the high calorie condition thought that the best serving temperature should be warmer than those in the low calorie condition, and the effect is bidirectional. So in other words, if we see an advertisement of a high caloric food, we expect that food to be served hot, and vice versa. So you might be asking, what if people have this belief? So this next chapter will cover the consequences of this effect. We show that consumers choose more complementary foods. They consume or intend to consume a food or beverage or both when they are consuming a cold product rather than a hot one. Serving temperatures can increase complementary purchasing, and that can enhance firms' bottom line, but it could also add unnecessary calories to the meal. So it should be interesting for both consumers and managers. All right, so this is our conceptual model. This is what I will show you in the next 2 chapters. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about this relationship. How does serving temperature impact complementary food choices? So formally, our hypothesis stated that foods and beverages served cold rather than hot will elicit behavioral consequences in the form of greater purchasing of complementary items, side dishes or beverages during a consumption episode, and an increase in incremental spending. Moreover, we are going to also show why this is happening. The lower expected satiety associated with foods and beverages served cold compared to hot mediates the effect of serving temperature and is the underlying reason of why we are seeing this behavior. So first of all, again, we went to literature just to see what we have on satiety. First of all, what is expected satiety? Because our results and our hypothesis, although actual satiety and expected satiety are correlated, we are looking at expected satiety. Expected satiety is the expectation of the degree of fullness or satiation after consuming a product. Research suggests that expected satiety is a major determinant of a person's food intake. If a consumer expects a food item will be less satiating, they are more likely to consume more food to achieve a desired satiation level. Past research investigated this phenomenon. Researchers looked at M&Ms of different colors versus the same color. And similarly, they looked at eating pasta of different or similar shapes. And researchers found that those who ate the different colored candies and different shaped pasta were more satiated than the same color candies. So researchers found that variety impacts satiation, right? Expected satiety is highly dependent on how food is presented or how food is served. For instance, past research suggests that if you serve the same amount of food on a smaller plate versus a larger plate, people who take the smaller plate think that it is more satiating. People also anticipate that semi-solid food will be more satiating than the same item, same food served cold. So those smoothies are not satiating in our minds compared to a bowl of fruits. So that's past research shows that the size, texture, labeling, packaging, sensory factors of a food impact a food's satiating quality. So past research also notes that products are very often purchased and consumed along with other products. So if I'm not satiated, I'm very likely to compensate for that. So such as consuming an entree with a side dish. Even if I'm not satiated and I feel full, there's research suggesting that we tend to consume things in very close temporal proximity. As a result, the characteristics of one item that is chosen can impact the desirability of other item. I gave the example before about choosing an unhealthy entree and choosing a healthy side. So the complementary food choices or balancing efforts have been observed in sensory characteristics of foods as well, such as softer foods are perceived to have more calories, which leads to subsequent healthier food choices. Building on this related streams of research, we propose that consumers who are served a cold item, food or beverage, will expect it to be less satiating and will be therefore more likely to choose and purchase additional complementary side dishes and beverages. So we next show that people who buy cold items buy additional consumables by two field studies. All right, so we conducted this study in a restaurant that has been in the business for over 50 years. The restaurant offers a variety of sandwiches, and each of these sandwiches can be ordered cold or hot. They also offer salad, entrees, beverages, and snacks such as potato chips and cookies. At this particular location, most lunch and dinner food transactions are single order, meaning that one customer per transaction orders. So we agreed with the manager and we purchased the restaurant's transaction records, basically the receipts, for a small fee. And we purchased 123 receipts. No one knew the study was being conducted. Data were collected for the transactions that took place from 11:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. over a 2-week period. Oh, and we measured, we actually coded for side orders, price paid, size, and calories by using the restaurant's online nutritional information. All right, first of all, we looked at the percentage of complementary food items purchased, and we found that among those who bought a cold sandwich, 46% of them also bought a complementary side, compared to 24% in the hot condition. So people were actually buying more complementary food items when they were getting that cold sandwich. We then looked at the price paid for complementary items, which is correlated, and it was significantly different between conditions, such that those who bought a cold sandwich paid significantly more money than those who bought a hot sandwich. And finally, by utilizing online calorie calculation websites, we calculated the caloric content of the complementary items purchased by these two groups, and we found that those who bought a cold sandwich purchased more calories than those who bought a hot sandwich, purchased presumably to consume them. Right? This was an important study, as here we're not showing intentions, we're showing behaviors and we're showing actions. We thought field studies are great, so we ran another field study in a small coffee shop at New York City. This time, data were recorded for transactions that took place in between 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. over 2-week period from the end of June to the beginning of July on 4 non-consecutive days. 2 trained assistants observed consumers' transactions during the data collection period. Coffee personnel were not aware that the study was being conducted, which is surprising because our research assistants sat there for 8 hours, but they didn't understand. On a coding sheet, researchers coded the time they arrived, the consumer's time of arrival, until they left. So all the behaviors until one consumer is at the shop until they leave. They recorded the serving temperature of the beverages ordered, as well as any food orders. And the assistants also recorded several other measures to use as covariates, such as size of the beverage ordered, whether the order was a to-go order or the consumer consumed the order in the cafe, whether the pattern was alone or with one or more persons, whether the consumer paid for the order with cash or credit. So all of these were recorded. In total, observers recorded 149 transactions. We were interested again in the complementary food items purchased. And we found that among those who bought a cold beverage, approximately 45% of them also bought a complementary side, compared to 14% in the hot condition. We then looked at the price paid for complementary items, which was significantly different between conditions, such that those who bought a cold beverage paid approximately $1 more, approximately $1 more than those who bought a hot beverage. And once again, by utilizing online calorie calculation websites, we calculated the caloric content of the complementary items purchased by these 2 groups. And we found that those who bought the cold beverage bought more calories, again, purchased more calories than those who bought a hot one. And as you can see, the difference was enormous. So the effect of serving temperature leads to real purchase behavior. That's what we show in studies 5 and 6. Moreover, we replicate our findings in the fields with the field studies with actual purchases. I'm only showing you some of these studies that we conducted. We have, I don't know, at least 30 studies, if not more. 20 of them can make it to another paper, honestly, but I'm showing you, given the time and the interest, only the ones that we are super passionate about and that supports our theory as a package rather than alone. And we show that this translates into real purchase behavior, and we replicate our findings. People buy more complementary items after consuming a cold beverage or food. They buy more calories and they spend significantly more money. So additional purchases can occur because cold consumables are expected to be less satiating, which is what I am going to focus on in the last chapter of the presentation. Oops. All right, so again, is it really expected satiety? What's going on? Why people are behaving this way? All of these underlying and psychological reasons are extremely interesting to us. So that's why we run another actual consumption study with 94 students. So before being served the cookie, all participants, and this is again a cookie study, before being served the cookie, all participants solved the cookie and learned the temperature of the cookie they will consume. Then participants indicated the extent to which they expected to be satiated, full, satisfied, and stuffed, which is an established expected satiety scale. Participants were then told, after answering these questions, they were told to consume the cookie, which was basically a Costco cookie, as you can see on the right. And the cookies were same size, same form, and same calories. Here we show that this was the first time we show this, and we show that people who consume the cookie will expected the cookie to be less satiating than the same item served hot. This expected satiation is correlated with actual satiation because we also measured actual satiation. So we show that people who consume the cookie on cold expected to be less satiated. Then we ran and we wanted to see the full story and the full conceptual model. That's what we do in this study. This is the second hypothetical scenario I am presenting to you today. All of the prior studies were actual consumption studies. It's an important study because the sensory elements are addressed here. What are those? Basically, we're controlling for especially smell in this study because smell of the food is controlled. It's an online study. 245 participants completed this study, and they were told to imagine eating a hot, cold, or room temperature slice of pizza. And they were asked, if you ate this portion of food right now, how long would it take until you were hungry enough to eat again? And then we asked them to type their answer, and the lowest value we gave them was 10 minutes to highest value of 360 minutes. And then we also asked them, if you bought the slice of pizza and then ate it, how likely would you be to buy each of these other items along with your slice of pizza? Assume that all items cost about the same amount of money. And then we said, we gave them the option of chocolate chip cookies, apple, a bag of chips, a brownie, a granola bar, and French fries. They had the option to choose all of them, or they had the option to skip this question and not choose any of these. We found that those who imagined consuming the cold slice of pizza expected to be less satiated than those in the hot condition, those who imagined to consume the hot slice of pizza. As you can see, those who imagined to consume the hot slice of pizza expected to be full for almost 2.5 hours, where compared to cold, only 100 minutes. We again show that imagining to consume a cold food leads to complementary food purchase intentions. People in the cold condition indicated that they would be more likely to buy the items that I told you compared to the ones in the hot condition. And then we test for mediation. We found that, as hypothesized, those in the cold condition, as opposed to hot, expected to be less satiated than the hot. And expected satiety predicted complementary food choices. In addition to that, that was the underlying reason of why this happened. In addition to that, the indirect effect for hot versus cold serving temperature was significant. So we replicated, with this study, we replicated the effect of complementary food choices and the effect of serving temperature on complementary food choices. And we also found out the underlying reason why people tend to buy more food items when they consume or imagine consuming cold food items. I think a hypothetical scenario is really important here because especially recently, we buy food online. We eliminate the sensory aspects of food at this moment. So we look at the food and then if we choose a cold food, what we show here is we tend to pair that up and support that with complementary food choices. All right, that's all for the empirical support. We, across a series of studies, some of them I shown here, provide a robust evidence about serving temperature and its effects. So we show that serving temperature creates a belief, a false belief, a misbelief, a lay belief. We also show that serving temperature leads to complementary foods and beverages, the purchase of complementary foods and beverages. And we also show why this is happening. So the obesity worldwide, of course, is still on the rise. It's really alarming, especially in the US. The National Center for Health Statistics reported that 40% of the US adult and approximately 20% of the US youth population are obese. Every indication suggests that this number will continue to grow. And as we know, the medical costs for overweight people are significantly higher. And being overweight can be an invitation to certain types of diseases, such as type 2 diabetes or cancer. So this is an important research for consumer well-being. In addition to the theoretical policy implications, we have managerial implications as well. So there are a number of practical implications that can stem from this research. First of all, physical temperature is something that can be manipulated in packaging via a simple cue. This would likely benefit a consumer's well-being by lowering the subsequent consumption, but not signaling that that it is hot might lead to additional purchases. These results may be particularly relevant for managers of buffets and airport grab-and-goes because they generally have separate sections for cold and hot foods. So adding additional food items like a bag of chips in the cold food sections of these venues may positively impact revenues. Our work also offers a strategy for managers of food establishments that would like to push healthy food purchases primarily by adding a hot option. They'll be more into their existing menu. They'll be more likely to be able to do that. And really importantly, this is pretty applicable to services such as Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig, or now recently I've been getting a lot of advertisements from Noom, who uses psychological tools to assess why we eat. So that will be really applicable for Noom as well. And they could construct a suggested meal plan consisting of more and easier to prepare hot foods and beverages. This can reduce the consumption of side dishes and caloric beverages. That's all from me. Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our work. Like Mimi said, this has been published at Appetite. I'm happy to send the paper if you are interested, and you can reach out to me directly. Any questions?
Yeah, this is really, really interesting. We do have some questions, and please feel free, everybody, to add them to the Q&A and to the chat. First question that I have from the Q&A is, do you know if there are any demographic or cultural differences in consumer perceptions of the health of hot versus cold food?
I can take this. Okay, I'll take this. So we haven't looked at cultural differences, but there must be cultural differences because cold foods are perceived to be healthier in some cultures, such as India, for instance. But at the same time, hot foods are perceived to be nurturing or warm or have been a part of festivals or festives or traditional meal and holiday scenarios in other cultures. So there should be a culture difference in that, and we think that future research can look at that. But demographics, in every study we looked at demographics, age and gender. We haven't seen any differences. They didn't impact our results.
That's really interesting. I also wondered about specific diets, like the raw food diet, or, you know, the sort of raw food movements where no food is ever heated over like 104 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So what do you think some sort of exchange people have in their minds when they, you know, are people hungrier when they're doing the raw food diet?
So that's a good question too.
Or juicing, right? I mean, outside of not having, you know, all the food they would normally eat, but it is predominantly colder.
So instead of a general claim, I'm not going to go ahead and say, yes, people are hungrier if they're eating raw food. But I'm going to say that the focus should be around snacking and adding more complementary sides, right? So I want to make that part salient. So if you're eating raw food versus the same item served hot, not mac and cheese. So we're not comparing mac and cheese hot versus salad. So if you're actually eating a bowl of salad, I mean, it's not arguable that that's better for you as a dieter, right? But if you're eating mac and cheese hot versus cold, you can't eat it raw, but you can apply this to a raw food diet too. Then I am talking about that. So if you have an intention to skip warming up your food because you're busy, you shouldn't, because you'll be more likely to snack.
But people do make these sort of mental exchanges, particularly when they are dieting. And, you know, a lot of the drive, the motivations that people have when they make their choices might be liking. So we do have a question here that says, do you think liking impacts perceived calories? I think that this is interesting. Again, thinking of that sort of behavioral economic exchange that people have.
Yeah. Can Should I take it? Okay, I'll take it, Mimi and Lauren, because I have an extra backup slide here.
Oh, okay.
So like these are the things that I remembered. Actually, I didn't have time to go over all of the data sets or all of the results, but these are some of the variables, some of the control measures that we used just to see, because we were as curious as you were about liking, about typicality of the serving temperature, because some of the food items are expected to be served cold, and people will be extremely surprised if it is hot, right? So the typicality of the serving temperature, liking of that, frequency of the consumption, frequency of consumption of that food, nutrition involvement, visual attractiveness, effort to prepare, because we know that it takes longer to prepare a hot food item, and it takes longer to consume a food item that's hot as well. Time to prepare, time to consume, and these are some of the variables that we controlled for in our studies, and liking was one of them. I think it's a fair question, because if you don't like the food, you might not even actually decide about it, like, right, you won't even buy the food. So
true, very true. So I guess another thing I would kind of ask in this, you're presenting these findings and they're really interesting and they make a lot of sense. Do you think that there can be learning on people making their food choices? Meaning that, do you think that consumers who know that they might be influenced by hot or cold foods, can they change their behavior based on that? Can they learn to see the foods as being more calorific or less?
Yes. So when primed to make mindful calorie estimations or choices, and when people, so if there was a public awareness campaign around this, people will first deny that they have this bias, because they will say, no, I don't do that, but they do. And there is research supporting that biases can be corrected if made salient. So you're right. If there is a public awareness campaign, it can help people change their behavior and their perception.
Right. So maybe something like Noom might, since it's very behavioral and very psychological, that might be something they could help train people to recognize. That's interesting. Could you tell us about maybe some next steps for your research or some new approaches that you are excited about in the future?
Me? Okay. So I am so excited about so many projects that I have, and serving temperature is pretty fruitful. So if we were to continue this, this is a very novel finding. And if we were to continue this, we can find interesting boundary conditions. As one of the participants asked or suggested, culture would be one of them, right? So power distance might be an interesting thing to look at, it, or power in general can be interesting and can impact our purchases too. So how powerful do we think over food might impact and might maybe diminish? Like, we can also look at the effect of comfort foods around hot foods and cold foods. Some people have cold foods as their comfort food, which is to me very surprising. To me, it's always hot foods. And some people have hot foods as their comfort foods. How can that impact? Is there an interaction there that can impact the complementary purchases? There are so many things to do, but so little time.
And I'd love to hear an answer for that from Dr. Morrin and Dr. Block as well. What do you think the next steps are for you?
Well, I think Sara handled that question very well, because we hesitate actually to reveal a lot of our ongoing projects until they're at a stage where they're ready to be submitted or they're conditionally accepted, something like that. So I actually am going to keep
You're going to punt that a little bit. Well, no, that's exciting that there's going to be more work. So that is really interesting. Definitely going to keep an eye out for that.
I don't know if Lauren wants to comment or.
Well, I won't give away the store, Mimi, but I guess some work for food scientists might be to actually try to calibrate this. So what if you had a meal that is both hot and cold? So you have a cold salad on a plate with the hot macaroni and cheese. That is beyond what we have looked at but I think probably for, a food scientist, that's an important question to answer.
Yeah, very interesting. So I encourage everybody to reach out, as you see the email here, but also join us in the next talk. Thank you very much to Dr. Morrin, Dr. Baskentli, and Dr. Block for joining us.